My name is Mark Maddox. I'm the Public Works Director and Town Engineer for the Town of Paradise. With me here at the podium is Paul Martin with Mark Thomas, a consulting firm that is contracted to help with the Transportation Master Plan. Joining us also on the call, we have two Laurens, Lauren Piku and Lauren Chilson from Headway Transportation. And you might be able to see them with your camera there. Hello. Thank you for joining us on the call and participating in the presentation. So with that, I'll also take a moment to recognize we have both our Mayor and Vice Mayor, Mayor Crowder, thank you for joining, and Vice Mayor Jones, thank you for being here in person tonight. We're so grateful to have you as well. So before we get started on the presentation, I am going to share my screen, and so for those in the audience in person, we have two monitors here that you'll be able to see everything we're presenting as well to our virtual audience also. So with that, I'm going to take over sharing, and you should be able to see my screen now, which is the Transportation Master Plan, Roadway to Infrastructure Recovery Fact Sheet. So the Transportation Master Plan is really our planning response from the 2018 Camp Fire, and this is a critical next step from the 2019 Community Long-Term Recovery Plan, which set forth critical community objectives that guide certain priorities forward, including circulation improvements. So this is a part of that public input process. We again thank you for joining us in person or virtually. This project is funded through a grant through the Economic Development Administration. This is a $1.8 million grant, and we are looking to identify infrastructure improvements, ones that are low cost and ones that are big ideas and come with big costs as well, to move forward and get the public input about where our priorities should lie on infrastructure projects in Paradise. So with that, closing with the opportunities for public input. Obviously you're here, thank you. We had one workshop already on June 3rd, and you can watch that webinar on our website at townofparadise.com under Recovery in the Transportation Master Plan. We also have two future webinars similar to this one tonight that focus on downtown and Clark Road design standards, as well as a review of bicycling and walking network infrastructure. So with that, I will stop sharing my screen and turn it over to our consultant team with Lauren Chilson. I believe you're first.
Thank you, Mark. Yes, good evening, everyone. And it's my pleasure to present to you a number of ideas that we have as part of our transportation master planning process. And we're going to ask a lot of questions tonight. I want to just start by saying nothing you see tonight is set in stone by any means. What we're really here to do is ask questions and gain feedback that will inform the plan as we move forward. We're in very early stages, and so just understand where we are in the process and that this really is looking for input, and you'll see we're going to ask a lot of questions. So thank you for your participation, and I'm going to get rolling through the presentation. I see that I've got to get my presentation going here now that we've moved content around.
There we go. We can see it now. Thank you, Lauren.
All right. Very good. Was I muted during my introduction there?
Nope, we heard you.
Very good. Okay, let's start. So this meeting is being recorded for the record and for everyone's benefit to come back and look at it later. It will be posted on the town website following the meeting. For those of you who are on virtually, your camera and mic are turned off for the time being, just for management of the meeting. But at the end of the meeting, we'll have a question and answer period and give you instructions on how to raise your hand and give opportunity to participate in the Q&A session. So hang out for that. We'll give you more instructions later. And then for those of you in the room, at the conclusion of our presentation, we're absolutely going to have a time for questions and answers at the podium and from the team, and we absolutely encourage you to participate later on. All right, so tonight the focus is really on roadways, evacuation, and those types of related transportation topics. And this is an open forum. The entire purpose here is to show you some ideas and see what you think, and then later garner more of your comments through a online survey that we have created that has a number of questions, all very similar to what you're going to see tonight, but it will really drill down in the details and give you opportunities to prioritize a variety of improvements and comment on different things that you're going to see in the presentation tonight. And so we really encourage you to go and do that following our presentation tonight. That survey will be available through July 13th online, and again, links will be provided, and it's on the town's website. So tonight we really have three key topics, all very roadway specific. And those topics are daily traffic needs. That's what the community needs to travel efficiently and safely on a day-to-day basis. Intersections, roadway capacities, the number of lanes, how roadways connect, all of those things affect your daily commute and just activities. And so that's the first topic. Then we're going to cover evacuation and what we can do on a roadway basis with permanent and temporary improvements, and also how agencies can work together and the efforts that we're currently have underway to coordinate multi-agency efforts during emergencies. And then briefly we'll talk on safety and the local road safety plan update that we're performing. That aspect of safety has to do with really everyday activity. Pedestrians, bicycles, how do we cross the street? Are intersections safe? And what can we do on a programmatic level to make them even better? So those are the key points for tonight, and we look for your feedback. All right, like everything else in the planning world, and as we put together master plans for communities, it's a process. And I just want everyone to understand that the things that we're talking about tonight go into a plan, and then where do they go? Well, there's a long implementation process, and it requires funding, and a lot of funding, and environmental processes, and many other things that take time. And so while we'll establish a plan over the next year or so, all building on previous plans, going back as far as 1994 general plan, that's really the backbone of what we have for a roadway system and policies and procedures. We're moving forward from there. We're incorporating the long-term community recovery plan that was developed over the last couple of years for the town, taking those actions and now trying to put them into place. And that's going to happen over a 10-plus year period. So keep that in mind over the next 10-plus years as you wonder, hey, what about that thing we talked about back at the meeting? When is that going to happen? Well, it's coming, and some will be sooner than others. All right, so let's dive right into the daily traffic needs, our first topic. Again, we're going to identify improvements to the roadway network and intersections, identify those locations that have the greatest needs, and we're going to ask for your help in doing that. And we're going to talk about some potential new roadway connections. And I just want to state at the very onset, when you see a line on the map, it's a potential, and we're asking, is this the right thing? Is this the right location? And that line doesn't mean it's the specific location, it means it's a general concept, so please keep that in mind as well. And through this process, we're also establishing some new standards. For example, we're setting standards for new striping throughout the town. You may be well aware that many, if not most, of the major roads in town will be repaved over the next few years. One of the things we want to do is have consistent striping everywhere in town, since we're going to have new roadways, and that's the type of thing that we're working on through this transportation master plan process. All right, so we started by inventorying all the existing intersection controls within the town on major routes. Shown in red are all the traffic signals, and black dots are all the existing all-way stop controls, or four-way stops as many people refer to them. And this is just a baseline for understanding what we have today and where we could go in the future. Similarly, we identified all of the roadways within the town that have more than 2 lanes. And so those are shown in color. You can see the variety of those. And what you see is, Clark and Skyway have some 5-lane sections. There are very few 4-lane sections and 3 in town. Everything else is pretty much a 2-lane road, and you know that intuitively, but But here it is as our starting point. And so really one of the key exercises of long-term transportation planning, particularly with traffic engineering perspective, is identifying what these roadways need to be over a 20-year plus horizon. And really we should be looking out beyond that, because these roadways stay in place for decades and decades and decades, if not 100 years, right? So we can talk about the 20-year, that's important, but we need to think a little bit beyond that too. So I want you to know that we have looked at all the major roadway segments in town for a 20-plus year horizon. Now that's about 30 roadway segments, all of the collectors, arterials, and major roadways. We are not performing detailed analysis on the local streets. Most of those are fairly low volume, nowhere near exceeding capacity, and so we've focused on those roadways that are most likely to have a potential for capacity issues later on down the road. So to be clear, the traffic analysis utilizes pre-fire traffic volumes, 2018 timeframe, 2017-2018 timeframe, plus 20%. And that's the analysis methodology for looking out 20 years and beyond. And you could say, well, that might be too much. I don't know if we're going to be 20% beyond where we were pre-fire. Perhaps we could debate that, but just put on your 30, 40, and 50-year hat, and things change. And so we want to plan ahead as best we can, and that's the reasoning behind it. So after we look at each segment throughout the town, we find that really all of the roadways throughout the town have adequate capacity for that pre-fire plus 20%, with the exception of Skyway in the downtown area, and we're going to spend a good deal of time talking about that tonight, as that's a key location, and we're well aware of the broad community interest in that segment of roadway. All right, but before we get there, let's talk about the broad variety of improvements that we're starting to contemplate through the northern portion of the town. So I'm going to outline these, and this is key. The next three slides are really the crux of the entire plan in some ways, and so I'm going to spend a little bit of time on these. Shown in green are key roadways where through the long-term recovery plan, it was identified that 3 lanes plus a separate path would be desirable for evacuation and just long-term planning in general. And so what you see here is Skyway, Clark, Upper Clark, and Pence all having eventually 3 lanes. That's the idea. And then let's talk about a reconfiguration. We've heard desire for improvement of more road serving the park. And so we're suggesting that perhaps that should be improved to public road standards, and we'd like your input on that. We've heard many comments over the last few years through the recovery plan and other actions by the town that Forest Service Road should perhaps be connected over to Skyway. The consulting team is asking similarly, should a roadway be extended east from Forest Service Road at Clark over towards Pence? We've not heard that come up from the community, but we're asking, is that an intelligent improvement? And then we've heard a number of comments about connections on the east of Pence, in the Merrill, Stark, Billy Road extension area, that there are limited access points in there, and other connections would be very beneficial during evacuation. And so we're showing a few ideas on how that could happen. We're asking again for your input on those. We move to the southern part of town. You can see in the bullets some of the key roadways that we're talking about. Again, Skyway improvements through the downtown segment. We're going to talk about that more. We're showing the potential for 3 lanes on Pence, Neal, and Row Road. And then you can see some intersection improvements with the pink dots. The most important, I think, perhaps, is the Foster-Black Olive intersection, where that's a little bit of an awkward intersection today, and we're looking for improvements there, and want to see if that's on the priority list for the community as well. Then you see a number of extensions. Elliott Road extension has been contemplated for many years, in fact, back through the 1994 general plan. Row Road extension would be of benefit to the community, and that it connects up a number of long dead-end streets. And post-fire and evacuation, we learned a lot of things about how an east-west connector could be beneficial for the town as a whole. I will also highlight a Pearson reconfiguration potential, which we'll talk about in a few minutes. And Lauren will later talk about some of these other extensions and ideas for during the evacuation portion. Okay, so the question for tonight, and you're going to see in the online survey, is, in general, do you support the improvements shown? Are these the highest priorities in your mind? Help us prioritize them, and comment tonight on likes, questions, dislikes, and help inform us on what you think really is important here. That this is really important that we understand this early in the process, and we're looking for your feedback. Okay, I did mention the Road extension. This is a project that we're trying to move forward, and you can see how in general the alignment could cross all the way from Skyway to Pence over a number of phases. Now, this is a major project. It's time sensitive, and that it will take a long time. There are environmental concerns that must be weighed. There are costs and a number of aspects that complicate it, but we believe that it's an important project, particularly for evacuation. It does connect up 4 dead-end streets, provides everyday circulation benefits and emergency circulation benefits, and it's been contemplated for a while here. So it is costly, and we're looking for funding options. And Mark, maybe you want to just add on to that just a little bit for me.
Yep, thank you, Lauren. I appreciate that. At this time, I just wanted to give a quick update on this project, and there has been some circulation of media articles about it. And I really want to take this opportunity to thank Congressman LaMalfa for advancing this project in the potential transportation bill that's currently being considered by Congress. He sponsored the project as a member-designated project and allocating about $1.8 million, which would get us really far along in the environmental process. And so we're really excited. Nothing's for sure yet. We're excited and grateful to see where this is going to go forward. But this is, again, one of the most tangible responses to the 2018 Camp Fire, especially when it came to transportation-related fatalities as a result of the fire. So connecting Sawmill, South Libby, Edgewood, all the way over to Pearson Road would be really crucial for the community and increasing our resiliency and moving forward. So I just want to provide that quick update. Thank you, Lauren, and the floor is all yours.
Great. Well, I promised we'd talk about Skyway, so let's go there next. Again, the analysis shows that over a 20-plus year horizon, or thereabouts, right, that 20% level increase over pre-fire volumes, that either 4 or 5 lanes will be needed in the downtown area between Pearson and Elliott. And so there are a number of ways that Skyway could be reconfigured actually within the existing curb lines or the existing width that's there today. But those come with trade-offs. I want to be very clear, right? You add more lanes, speeds can go up. You can remove parking, but that has impacts on businesses. You could remove sidewalks. We probably wouldn't propose that, but right, that has an impact on pedestrians in a big way. So understand that there's trade-offs with every option, and this is where we're really looking for community feedback on what the priorities are for Skyway through the downtown area. So we've created a few metrics, if you will, to help guide our decision and understand and make comparisons between various options. Everyday safety is important, and that reflects, how easy is it to walk, cross a street, make a left turn to or from Skyway in your vehicle, ride a bicycle, how safe do I feel? Evacuation capacity is also important, as we've learned over the last few years, and is a key concern. And so how many outbound lanes effectively could we create on Skyway with different scenarios? We want to support redevelopments. Part of the recovery plan is also to redevelop and bring business back to the downtown, increase commercial activity, tax base, and all of those great things that come along with a vibrant downtown. We want that downtown to be walkable, we believe, to support that vibrancy. And so crosswalks, sidewalks, ability to get from your car to a storefront is important. And then travel capacity on a daily basis is also important, right? And that's the capacity measure that I'm talking about in that 20+ year, 20% increase type scenario is, well, how many vehicles do we need to get through here on the peak hour in the morning and evening for the commute? So what we've done is measure each of these alternatives against each other and against existing conditions. The graph on the right side of the screen shows the blue arrows down the center. That's the existing condition. So everything in these alternatives is compared against where we are today in relative terms. So again, existing condition will be down the middle. If an alternative has an aspect of it that's deemed worse, you'll see that blue arrow slide to the left. If it's better, to the right, and so on. And you'll see that as we move forward. So that's the measure that we're working from today. All right, here we are today, existing conditions. You're well aware there are 3 lanes, one in each direction, up and downhill, with the center turn lane for left turn lane safety and the ability to circulate more easily than having 4 lanes. And you see all the blue arrows are down the center. Okay. During an evacuation, effectively what we have today is the opportunity to convert the center turn lane to a downhill or outbound lane. And we have the existing southbound lane, so we could effectively have 2 outbound lanes during evacuation. And in the box in gray, you'll see expected outcomes for each scenario. Today we have a reasonably walkable character. If we keep with this situation, we can maintain all parking, maintain left turns, but we get a little bit of traffic congestion in future years. So you'll see these outcomes with each scenario. All right, first option, option A, says we could return to something similar to what we had a few years ago. That would be 4 travel lanes and parking on both sides. All right, blue arrows move around. Everyday safety decreases. It becomes harder to cross the street. It becomes harder to make left turns. Evacuation capacity increases slightly though, right? Because now we have 2 southbound travel lanes, and they're regular travel lanes. Does this support redevelopment? Arguably not quite as well, in that we've created a more vehicle-centric environment. Is it walkable? Maybe a little bit less now because it's harder to cross the street, right? We have 4 travel lanes to navigate. However, travel capacity goes up, right? So you can begin to see this comparison, but option A is really returning to something similar to what was here in the past. All right, option B says, during an evacuation, we would really like to have even more travel lanes leaving town potentially. So could we get 3 southbound lanes? Sure, let's stripe 2 southbound lanes downhill and a center turn lane. That gives us 3. We still need the northbound lane, of course, but we'd like to maintain parking. So how does that scenario compare up? Well, capacity for evacuations increased. Everyday safety drops a little bit because now I have to navigate 2 southbound lanes as a pedestrian. And again, travel capacity is up slightly because of having 2 southbound lanes. So hopefully you begin to follow the process here. Let's move to option C. Option C says I would really like to have 5 lanes on this road, 2 northbound or uphill, 2 southbound or downhill, and I still want to have safe left turn lanes, so I'm going to provide a center turn lane. But what's the trade-off? Well, in order to make that fit, parking would have to be removed from the west side of the street in its entirety, which would mean about 37 parking spaces. Okay, we definitely get a lot of travel capacity, we get evacuation capacity, but we compromise in redevelopment potential, walkable downtown, and everyday safety simply because of the number of lanes we've created on the street and challenges crossing the street. So again, pros and cons. All right, our final option at this point for Skyway in the downtown area is option D, which simply says, if I really like bike lanes and the existing parking and I want to prioritize multimodal activity, particularly cycling, over travel lanes, this is an option that could be implemented. So 2 southbound lanes for evacuation and increased capacity, and 1 northbound travel lane maintaining the existing bike and parking lanes. Okay? This slide presents all of those scenarios side by side for comparison. And what struck me as I was looking at this again today, preparing for the presentation, was that I didn't identify one option that actually had more bars to the right than existing. Certainly, there are some that do for capacity, you see that throughout here, but in my mind, I don't see one option that checks every box as an improvement. And so it just goes back to the point that there are trade-offs here. So in the survey, online survey, you're going to see a number of ways to prioritize these, identify which you like better, rank them, and we encourage you to do that. And then tonight, please step up to the podium and give your opinions on various options, or just in general, how you feel about Skyway and what you think it should look like. All right, while I'm on Skyway, there are two crosswalks that we want to talk about as well and get some community feedback on. You know, crosswalks are important for pedestrian circulation and safety, and there's certain places there where they're needed. There just aren't signalized intersections near enough to make a crossing, and so we need to enhance the environment a little bit for pedestrians. There's a downside, though, too. There are safety risks and disruption to motorists in cases where they're not justified, and so we need to make sure that we're putting crosswalks in the right places, and that's part of our standardization going forward. So I'm going to ask you about two locations. We are considering the removal of the crosswalk at Terry Ash Park on Skyway that's between Elliott and Oliver. It's shown there in the aerial and then on the map as well. We'd like to get your feedback on whether or not you think this is a critical crosswalk to maintain. Similarly, there's a marked crosswalk with flashing beacon system near Lucky John Road. This formerly served the Home Tech Charter School. It's right in that area, in the building shown with the white roofs there. Again, we're asking, is there still a demand for this crosswalk? Is there still a strong desire and need for this? And please give us your comments on that. Okay, let's move on to Pearson reconfiguration. I noted that in the overall improvement slide. And we bring this up because there's a very short section of Pearson Road that has 4 lanes. You know, to the east of Black Olive was reconfigured a number of years ago to 3 lanes, yet this portion remains. And in the capacity analysis, we find that 4 lanes is not necessary for that 20-plus year horizon. So we might have an opportunity to do something differently here that could support recovery, redevelopment, and just an enhanced community. And we want to present options on that as well. So very similar to Skyway, existing condition, blue bars are down the middle. You have 4 travel lanes to each direction with parking on both sides. Options are converting that to 3 lanes plus bike lanes and parking very similar or matching the configuration that's east of Black Olive. Okay, very similar to that. Be consistent, more walkable, a little less travel capacity, with fewer lanes, but a little bit safer environment and easier to make turns. Option B would be similar to that, again with 3 lanes and parking. The difference here is there's a little extra width in the street, and we're asking the question, what if we constructed a 10-foot sidewalk on one side or the other to really enhance that pedestrian and redevelopment type of perspective along Pearson? So that's the difference between A and B. All right, option C says, yeah, but I really want 2 lanes headed toward the Skyway. And so how could you do that? Well, we could have 2 westbound lanes and still maintain the bike lanes and the parking. That is an option. The challenge here would be left turns, right? It's kind of similar today. They're hard to make. There's no place to make them. But this does provide nice westbound capacity. All right, well, in that vein, what could we do to provide the left turn lane and the 2 westbound lanes? Here's option D. Well, simply we remove parking from the south side of the street, effectively the south side of Pearson, and convert that to a bike lane plus travel lane, provide space for a center turn lane and the 2 westbound lanes. So a little bit narrower widths, but this sort of fits everything in if that's the desire. And again, a side-by-side comparison. This one struck me actually that if you look at option D, most of the blue arrows are similar to existing or maybe slightly better. So it actually does check all the boxes. Now, I'm not trying to form your opinion or guide the discussion any further than it needs to go. That was just an observation on my part. Most of the other options have strong pros and cons, as we saw on Skyway. So again, looking for your comments on this and in the survey. All right, I'm reaching the end of the various roads that we need to talk about, but we are curious to get some thoughts on Honey Run Road, specifically between Merlin Lane and Honeyview Terrace, the area shown in red. There are no homes in this particular area, so homes below the red would typically travel out to the valley using Honey Run. Above would travel out to Skyway typically, and so there might be opportunity to revise this portion of the roadway. Yes, it's a Butte County roadway. We need to keep that in mind, and so the town does not have jurisdiction over that full section of roadway, obviously, but we want your input for a broader community discussion. And so here's a couple things that could happen with Honey Run potentially, and we would like your opinions on these, please. We could close that segment, the segment that was shown in red specifically, not the rest of the roadway, close it to motorized traffic. Another option would be restricting it to one-way uphill travel only for both bikes and vehicles. Similarly, the roadway, that portion, could be restricted to one-way downhill travel, again, bikes and vehicles. Or the roadway could potentially be reopened for two-way travel with safety upgrades, which could be potentially guardrails or turnouts, tree clearing, a variety of other items, but recognize there is absolutely a cost associated with that, a minimum of $80,000 improvements for just that section we were talking about. So we know this has been an ongoing discussion for many years, but we haven't had it in the last few years, and so we're asking again as we talk in coordination with Butte County. All right, finally, I want to let you know that there will be an active transportation, that's bicycle, pedestrian, scooter, wheelchair type transportation modes. There'll be a workshop specifically on that topic on August 3rd, and that will feed very much into what we're talking about tonight as well. We are working very hard to tie all of the paths, bicycle lanes, sidewalks and pedestrian needs and crosswalks into the overall roadway network as well for a holistic plan. So with that, I'm going to move over and have Lauren Piku take over on evacuation. She's a senior associate in our office who has a lot of evacuation planning experience, and welcome, Lauren.
Thank you, Lauren. Can I get a thumbs up? Can everyone hear me okay? All right, good deal. Well, I do appreciate the opportunity to speak here tonight. I'm going to be talking primarily on the evacuation efforts and then a little bit on the local road safety plan. And starting with evacuation, we know that this is a very important topic. We know that this is very critical. Can't see the presentation anymore. All right, there we go. So for our efforts here in the TMP, we're really building upon some previous efforts. There was significant outreach, public outreach that was done after the campfire, and there were some really great recommendations that came out of that. There was also the after action report, which also had a lot of good recommendations for improvements as well. So the list that I'm going to go through is really a partial list, but hitting on some of the main points that came out of the previous community outreach. Some of the main topics, of course, were to improve the evacuation routes and look at the choke points, and those would be the intersections that had congestion during the previous evacuation. Another important topic from the community outreach was the multi-purpose pathways on the evacuation routes that could also be used by first responders in an emergency, and we'll talk more about that in the presentation. The public outreach also expressed a desire for more roadway connectivity, especially connecting dead-end streets, because that would give residents more options in an evacuation and more routes available to them. And Lauren Chilson talked about a lot of those connections in his presentation. There was also a desire expressed to eliminate open ditches on evacuation routes. And then there's the area outside of Paradise and some of those choke points that were identified in the previous evacuation that are very critical as well. And I just want to discuss that we know that there's so much more to an evacuation than just the transportation and roadway elements. There's other things, such as communication infrastructure, warning systems, and if those are not covered in the TMP, they're going to be covered in other areas. So just to talk about some of the ongoing efforts that we are doing, one is identifying the bottlenecks and proposed solutions to those. And we have identified those through two ways, really, through roadway intersection analysis, capacity analysis, and also just based on the previous past experiences. We are working on solutions that are both permanent, a lot of which Lauren discussed, permanent roadway, but then we're also looking at temporary solutions, things that could be implemented quickly on a temporary basis in the event of an evacuation. We're also approaching this from a holistic way. We're trying to tie in together those improvements that are good for everyday and future daily needs and making sure that we're picking projects that also have a benefit for evacuation. And also very importantly, we know that the evacuation doesn't end as soon as someone exits the town limits. We need to get that traffic safely all the way out of harm's way. And that means we really need to look at some of the identified pinch points that occurred outside of the town. And that's where we have facilitated this multi-agency coordination. So we identify those intersections or roadway segments, and we identify what resources we need, and we start to put agreements into place to make sure those resources will be fulfilled when needed during an evacuation. So to talk more about the multi-agency coordination, this is something that we have kicked off. Really the goal is we want to develop agreements. We want to develop actions for emergency control at these intersections. We want to have agreements put in place ahead of time and are specifically called out so that when an evacuation is called, they can be implemented immediately. Everyone knows where they need to go. The resources have already been identified and a plan has already been identified to deploy those resources very quickly. We have over 20 agencies that are participating in this effort, and we are meeting on a regular basis to collaborate, to talk about the needs, to talk about what sort of agreements we need to have in place. So we'll be updating more on that effort as more information as well. All right, so now I'm going to talk about some of the potential improvements related to evacuation, and I apologize if this graphic is small and hard to see. When you take the survey online, you should be able to see this in more detail, so it is a little bit small in here. And this is a very important part of the online survey. We really hope that you go in, we'll ask questions about some of the improvements. You'll have the opportunity to comment on them either tonight or in the survey, and we're very interested in the feedback. As Lauren said, and I want to reiterate, everything is potential at this point. These are all improvements and options that we are considering, and we're very eager to hear your feedback. So I'll go through this map as best I can in the small detail. The red line indicates the additional capacity on Skyway, as Lauren presented in great detail. The blue dashed line represents potential new roadway extensions or roadway connections, again, as Lauren went through in some detail. The kind of mint green lines show where we are proposing to do the 3-lane sections with the MultiUse Pass, which I'll go into a little more detail on. You can see a very small segment of purple line. That is a potential improvement to extend the dual southbound lanes on Clark south of Pearson. And that's just an area where immediately south of Pearson, there's a short segment of 2 lanes in the southbound direction, and then it goes to 1 lane. And we're proposing that if we lengthen that a little bit, then we'll be able to get more traffic through that intersection in the event of an evacuation. And you'll also notice small traffic signal icons throughout the map. That is identifying the signalized intersections within the town. And the proposed improvement there is to develop a traffic management center. It's called a TMC. And that would allow the opportunity to monitor these intersections remotely during evacuation, or really during all times as well. There's a benefit for everyday use as well. Another important feature is that you could potentially use this type of system to implement emergency evacuation signal timing plans on the fly as they are needed. So we see that as a good improvement, but again, we're interested in your comments and feedback on all of this. And you can see hopefully you can see some small blue squares. Those are 2 areas we'll talk about again where we are proposing to remove the median islands or vertical elements that are in the roadway. So this will be a part of the online survey. Please take it and please tell us your comments either here tonight or in the survey about these improvements. So going a little bit more into the MultiUse Pass, and that was the mint green line identified on some of the major evacuation routes. The cross-section that you see at the top represents the existing lane configuration. 2-lane roads, between 10 and 12-foot lanes, and open ditches on either side. And then the cross-section below it that says potential road and trail option is the proposed improvement where it would be widened to 3 lanes, 1 lane in each direction with a center turn lane. And then what you see on the left is a multi-use path that would have wonderful benefit for active transportation on a daily basis to be used by bicyclists, pedestrians, but then it has that added benefit that during an emergency or potentially an evacuation, it could possibly be used by emergency responders as well. Okay, we talked a little bit about the vertical roadway elements. There is a proposed project or recommendation to remove the median islands on Skyway at Town Hall and then also on Pearson, just with the thought that without the vertical elements, that pavement could be used in evacuation. However, it needs to be used and the vertical elements would not be impeding that. There is also a potential for future policy that vertical elements in the roadway on future public works projects would be discouraged. And that could mean medians, splitter islands, delineators, curb extensions, anything in the roadway that it is vertical or not flat pavement. Okay, as we talked about too, we also recognize that there is a great need to look at the evacuation needs in the community outside of the town limits. And this is what this map represents. The green lines you see represent the major evacuation routes. And we are looking at and contemplating contraflow needs on all of these routes. We are looking at where contraflow would be most beneficial, where it's most feasible to implement. And also we are hoping to design a contraflow system that is flexible, so it could be implemented in an emergency really when and wherever it is needed. You will also notice a pink dashed line connecting Skyway to State Road 99. That represents a long-term project. It's a Southgate interchange project. Like I said, it is long-term, years in the future, but this could potentially provide another access point, another route, and certainly a way to move flow out of Paradise and onto State Route 99. The intersections that you see identified on this map represent some of the key intersections that were identified as either being a pinch point or a bottleneck in the previous evacuation, or intersections that could potentially be a bottleneck that occur outside of the town. And this goes back to that multi-agency coordination. These are just some of the intersections, kind of the first round that we are looking at to see who maintains these intersections, who owns them. In an evacuation, what would the communication plan be? What would the resources be? What agreements can we put together ahead of time so that they can be implemented quickly? And we'll be asking your opinions on these as well. Okay, moving on to the local road safety plan. This is another component of the TMP. And a local road safety plan is really a framework that was developed by the Federal Highway Administration to identify and prioritize safety improvement projects on local and rural roads. It's primarily geared towards everyday safety needs, but certainly evacuation needs can be considered as well. It's a methodical process for developing countermeasures or solutions. It looks at crash data. It relies heavily on community input and also on stakeholder engagement. So as part of this online survey, we'll be asking you questions as well related to everyday safety topics. and that will help guide the local road safety plan that we are preparing. A similar report was prepared in 2018. It was the Paradise Systemic Safety Analysis. And really, the LRSP is going to be an update to that report to reflect the changes that have happened. Very importantly, an LRSP is used for HSIP funding, or Highway Safety Improvement funding. These reports are necessary in order to get HSIP funding, and this is a way to get, or a mechanism to fund some of these projects based on their benefit cost ratio. And more importantly, too, they're not solely about engineering. That's certainly a critical component, and part of the LRSP update is going to be to identify engineering and safety type projects, but it really looks at more than that. It's a holistic approach to addressing safety, so it relies on what they call the 4 E's, which are engineering, education, enforcement, and emergency services. So that means some key components of this plan could be things like educational campaigns, outreach campaigns, social media type campaigns, those type of efforts as well. So we have started working on this. We have updated the crash data that has occurred, and importantly, we really have separated it pre and post Camp Fire, because we know that there were just significant changes in traffic patterns after that time. We have also gone through the previous report, and we've looked at the recommendations that report had in it, and we've updated the list. We've identified some of the improvements have already been implemented. Some of them are going to be addressed through other areas of the TMP, and some of them may have changed in priority, and there may be new priorities, and that's what that update effort will include. And again, the public outreach component is very critical to an LRSP, so we really appreciate everyone taking the survey and giving us some good feedback for that. And with that, I want to talk a little bit about the survey, a little bit about it. It's brief. It should take about 10 minutes to complete. It's not long. It's going to cover the topics that we talked about this evening, and there will be a recording of this meeting in case you want to go back and listen or hear everything. But also, it's not necessary to have heard the presentation or attended in order to take the survey. If there's any information that you need, it will be contained a brief description in the survey before the question, so you have the information you have. So please take it. Please tell your friends about it. It's going to be open through July 13th. It is right on the Town of Paradise's website. There'll also be some links to it on the Facebook page. And we're also going to have some flyers printed at Party in the Park. It's going to have a little QR code on it. So you can actually hold your cell phone camera right up to it, and it will open a web link up to the survey. So easy to take, short to take, and will provide some great feedback. So we really appreciate it. Okay. I think we're ready for Q&A. So,
all right. Thank you, Lauren and Lauren. You both did a great job. We really appreciate the feedback too, or the presentation. So great. So before we jump to the Q&A session, I just want to continue and build a little bit more about the survey so that the community here in the audience and virtually can actually see what the survey is going to look like, to where you can see, if you watch the presentation, how does that translate into taking the survey. So here is, let's see, can you see my screen yet? Okay, I can't see it. Okay, here's the survey. All right, Alt tab. All right, so here's the survey. So there will be a little introduction, information about our transportation master plan, where you can find more information about that on our website. And here we go on the survey. And I'm going to go ahead and just quickly walk through the 9 pages. So there's some basic information. We're wondering, what's your primary mode of transportation, your age range, and which best describes you. Are you a current resident of Paradise, planning to return, former resident of Paradise, or other? And we appreciate all of the feedback. And so when it comes to Skyway, page 3 here is everything that you heard in the presentation has been interpreted and applied here into the survey. You can review those options on your leisure and really weigh the pros and cons to each of them. And then here at the bottom, you'll have an opportunity where you could rank as you see fit and change your rankings along the way. I believe you have to hit reset. So anyhow, you can reorder those and tell us how you think that should move forward. And again, with this information, I'll take this as a point of order, is what we're going to do is package this up as a part of the Transportation Master Plan, present to the Paradise Town Council, our mayor and vice mayor and the full council, and then seek formal direction. So that means two things. One, nothing's decided, and two, there's going to be more opportunities for public input at those subsequent council meetings. A couple of information items on, should we keep or should we get rid of a couple of these crosswalks? Again, crosswalks inherently, they sound great, but there's actually some studies that show a marked crosswalk can be, especially uncontrolled, inherently more dangerous than an unmarked crosswalk. There's that presumed safety that may or may not be there and cause a pedestrian to be a little more less careful than what we would like to see them crossing a major arterial like Skyway. So really quick here, also recapping the Pearson Road options. I'm sorry for scrolling so quickly, but we really appreciate all of the work that has gone into the survey, and I look forward to seeing how this information comes through. The Honey Run Road design options, again, facilitating that conversation locally and in collaboration with Butte County, to where if we did want to move something forward, we could ask Paradise Town Council. The Board of Supervisors for Butte County could concurrently have a discussion and really come up with a solution that makes sense. What we really need to communicate, though, is reopening it as is. It just isn't safe. It was barely safe before the fire. Even though the hazard trees have been removed, we now have exposed edges and cliffs that represent significant hazards that need to be mitigated. And so for two-way traffic across a 12-foot pathway between the two communities is definitely a challenge. So we're interested in your feedback there. So lastly, again, some of those items that were maybe harder to see on the slides, they're again here, kind of this master plan view of all of the improvements, and help us prioritize those. And if we haven't put forward something that's your idea and you think that should be considered in a part of this document and our direction moving forward, tell us what that is, and we can see that and fully vet it and include it. This is not an open and closed case here, and this is our options that are limited, and we're just really excited to hear that feedback from you at this time. Again, more information on the multi-use pathway, a huge priority from the long-term recovery plan, and a way to balance some of our rural roads. I have another video here of actually Pence Road, and thank you to Rebuild Paradise for taking this amazing drone footage. But again, Pence Road, probably arguably our third most important arterial for evacuation in spots, has 20 feet of pavement. And obviously we know that was not enough in 2018, it's not enough today. So with that, we could widen and continue with this model that shows a multi-use path that could be used for egress of the public. It could be used for ingress of an emergency response vehicle. But again, that additional travel lane would give us that capacity we sorely need for regional evacuation events. Again, more information here about those regional projects. Provide additional comments. We talked briefly about Black Olive and Foster. If you've driven this intersection like me, it's a challenge, and there's so many different areas. What should we do? At a minimum, switch stop control on Black Olive Drive so there's more flow on Black Olive, prioritizing that over Foster north-south. But are there other options that could be considered as well? And then lastly, we want to hear your feedback about the splitter islands, the refuge islands for pedestrian safety, and the pros and cons about what those afford on a day-to-day use, but also the benefit for emergency evacuation. This beautiful island for at Pearson and Black Olive intersection it could be removed and provide that additional flexible capacity. But again, you'd probably find community members that might say, no, we'd like that. It's part of the road and creates this feel, complementing the park for the everyday use. And again, more information about the delineators and curb extensions. And again, tell us, should we discourage those types of safety elements on a day-to-day basis on future public works projects? Also, some good information. We're looking, where is your final destination during evacuation, and that'll help us communicate with our regional partners as well. I think we're about it. Additional transportation planning, what's your priority? Are you concerned about safety, speeding, lighting, walking and biking, or is it just emergency evacuations and sight distance? And those types of options. Again, I'm just kind of scrolling through. And then lastly, a really important question about what it takes. We received one email, I believe, today about the connection between Shea, Merrill, and that area off of Pence, and requiring more or asking for more connections for circulation, providing those options if there's some sort of obstruction on those. So would you support the town of Paradise approaching you and having a conversation about converting private roads to public roads for improved evacuation? That's really hard whether you live on the street or whether you don't live on that street, but having this information about the broader community, if that is a priority, that private roads should be considered, tell us yes or no, and then which ones that make real sense. There's very few that have already today circulation benefits. Toyon Lane could be one, but again, the condition of Toyon Lane between, Rowe and Foster is challenging. So should that be upgraded? But are there new roads that were discussed in tonight's presentation that should be considered? Elliott Road Extension, the Rowe Road Extension. Interestingly enough, the more we find out about the Rowe Road Extension project is much of the right-of-way was already acquired through the Butte County prior to incorporation of the town of Paradise. So, but again, that's a very sensitive topic and one that we're not overlooking, and we want to hear from the community. Would you be interested in your private road being converted to a circulation benefit for the broader community in our post-campfire reality? So with that, that's our last question. You can submit, and we'll have great data to share in the development of this document and really moving forward as we go. So with that, again, I want to say thank you for your time and listening to the presentation. For those that are joining us in person and virtual, we'll go ahead and get started on the Q&A. I think for the benefit of the people that came here tonight, it's so great to see a full council chambers again as much as we can to see you here tonight. So the best way we can do this is we'll go through and ask to raise your hand, and you can come up to the podium. And one point of order there with the podium microphone, it's very sensitive, so you have to get extremely close and really speak up loudly so that the people at home can hear you better. We really appreciate that. So it's more of a conversation, and we can make sure duplicate questions can be avoided and be valuable for everybody's time. With that, and then once we're done doing in-room, in-person questions on Microsoft Teams, if you're joining us here virtually, I see we've got quite a few people here. In the upper right-hand corner, you can raise your hand virtually. I'm going to go ahead and do that with my Teams camera. So you can see that. I've raised my hand. I see someone else has already raised their hand, which is great. So once we see that, we will call your name, and we will then enable you to be unmuted, and you can ask your question for the group. And we've got a great team of experts here that can address questions in the presentation, and again, items we may have missed along the way. So, did I cover everything? Okay, all right. So in the room, would anyone like to go first and ask a question? Yes, and if you could come to the podium, introduce yourself, tell us your name, and your question. Real close.
Real close.
Yes.
My name is Mimi Brown. I'm a marriage family therapist and social worker. What I've been hearing from just about everybody, including myself, is that we want our 4 lanes of Skyway back. What I do like, though, that was mentioned regarding Pearson Road, which I also think needs to be 4 lanes, stay 4 lanes, is making the sidewalks into that and like an extra road for emergency services. I think that would be good for Skyway downtown, as well as Pearson and Pence, to have those extra lanes. Also, I thought of, because we want a walkable downtown, all right? So one thing I've seen in downtowns are like speed bumps, but that can be put down flat. So like during the traffic, morning and night, then they could be put down, or emergencies put down flat. But otherwise, they're put up. So also, and that also helps with those crosswalks. So we can keep those crosswalks so people can cross the street because they're going to hit a speed bump, which is going to slow them down before a crosswalk. So those are some other ideas that I think weren't mentioned, and that could, I think both could happen, a walkable downtown plus a good safety route for everyone.
Great.
So, thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it, Mimi. Next. Yes, sir. Yep.
Thank you for the meeting. This is great. Learned a lot just sitting there listening. I had 2 tours in military service. One was the Army National Guard.
I'm sorry, sir.
The
Real
Army
close.
National Guard in
Thank you.
Alaska. And I was called out by the governor, our unit, to be deployed in a boundary fire in 2004. I sat into all the 8 agencies, and we were briefing every morning on what was going on with the charts and everything. And it was critical what I see here for the evacuation. If the evacuation and our first responders and the equipment and the people isn't set in place, it doesn't really matter what you do with the city, the roads and everything, it's not going to work, in my experience. When everyone's on the same evacuation plan, so I would my proposal would be implement your own evacuation team here to have transportation to eliminate people driving. You would have people, the school buses or whatever, to go in certain sites. Also have landing zones for air support. And one of the biggest things being in the National Guard, have the National Guard incorporate their team. Not only can they implement the equipment, they're an engineer team down there. That's what they do. They could help with the fire, they could help with the evacuations, the vehicles, and they can help the people get their stuff out and help them. And I think that would be critical because in the National Guard, they have 2 weeks of training. They use that training for their community. And they can do different evacuation plans, rehearsals, drills. They work with the community. They have all the technology. The National Guard is a federal agency. They're the highest in every safety standard you could possibly think of. When you're talking about hazmat, you're talking about all this stuff. And it's bulletproof. And there's no funding needed. That's our job. So it's just something.
Excellent. Thank you. Yep, absolutely. Yes. The very back. Yeah. Thank you for being here. And real close. Yep.
Not tall.
You can point it down. There you go.
Hello.
There we go. Thank you.
All right. Linda Horton Lyons. I have lived up here since 1978, year before it incorporated. So one of the things I like to hear that you're addressing the abutments that so many people was a nightmare during the fire. Having my business on the Skyway years ago, I was very interested in seeing how when you squeezed it back down to 2 lanes, with having more parking, well, it became a chain of cars, of train of cars, and no one could get in and out on the sides. So that didn't help. So if we can kind of blend an area where 3 lanes, middle, having that work for us during the fire, that you can have emergency vehicles coming up, and then 3 lanes going down is so much more beneficial. On the extensions to the different mural roads and Row Road, how are you going to talk to the property owners? Because sometimes they bought to get the actual privacy, and all of a sudden they have a roadway with everyone going. On the roads, the pedestrian walkways like the Lucky John, if it doesn't apply anymore, race it. It doesn't look like it's any biggie to do that.
Mhm.
And now that you brought forward that people take for granted that the cars are going to stop because they have this invisible white line
Mhm.
that they think is a powerful line, they will take a more cautious thought about going across, as long as you don't take us over for jaywalking. So, and little notes here. Oh, so as you are going along and start doing the actual plan and get the roads going and you run out of funding, what happens? Are you going to tax us? Or are you going to get grants continually?
Sure. I think that's a great question and a missing piece. And first, I will address the private road acquisition and engaging property owners. That's an entire process and not one that anyone would take lightly and have a thoughtful conversation and dialogue about it. And we understand many private property owners buy on a private road for that privacy and that quiet feel. And so having the potential of an extension or a gate being removed where you could have more circulation does raise those questions, and ones, again, we would take very seriously. And as far as your question on funding, so the town of Paradise is currently seeking significant funding amounts that are available or soon to be available. I'll say the acronym first, CDBG-DR. It's Community Development Block Grant Disaster Recovery Funds, which are administered by HUD, Housing and Urban Development, and Housing Community Development at the state level, HCD. The point is because of the disasters in 2018 across the state of California, there's $1 billion available for very significant recovery priorities, including housing, single-family housing, multifamily housing, and infrastructure. Of that $1 billion, there's about $330 million set aside for infrastructure. We are putting forward, and with your input and on these priorities and the outcome of workshops like this, which ones are the most forward or most important, and we are putting those forward in funding requests. So when it comes to the projects, they definitely have a cost, and there isn't an unlimited source of grant funds and local funds.
And don't we have competition with other communities that have gone through the fire?
Correct, as well. So there's communities in Southern California from, I believe, the Woosley Fire, the Carr Fire in Redding. So nothing is guaranteed at this point. We have secured significant funds for road recovery and road quality, road conditions, where we have a plan to literally repave all publicly owned and maintained streets, which when we do that enables really those low-cost alternatives to be integrated very easily. Restriping downtown Skyway, striping improvements, changing stop signs, and the like. So those can be done easily, but these widenings, they're very expensive. I believe one of the numbers I heard was about $8 million per lane mile. Wow. So if we're looking at Pence Road, 4.5 miles, we're in the range of 30 million to add that additional center two-way left turn lane. So if that's the top priority of the community, we can continue to advance that forward as we talk with these grant funding partners. But at some point, there will be a limit on how much we can do because those investments and those resources are so rare and scarce. But I'm really hopeful and confident that we can be very successful to compete for these funds, because in absence of the fire, the funds may not have existed regardless. So I'm hopeful we can do well, advance these priorities, and make some significant, meaningful change and capacity improvements regionally.
One of the other areas, when you're doing this construction as a business owner, when you impact businesses, their livelihood is at stake, your sales tax is at stake. Are you going to be working with the owners? Because my husband's been having to deal with it on a daily basis right now. And I mean, literally having to direct the traffic in, put the cars reverse in, out. So we're talking serious interruption. And we would like to know that they would be willing to, I'll go way back in the 90s, they were looking at the sewer and everything else. I said, can you work on the slowest day with me? And then the day that it did come, there were nowhere to be around, and I had a full restaurant. I tracked them down a mile, 3/4 a mile up, and I'm going, where's the foreman? And I said, when are you going to be below Pearson or Elliott on Skyway? Oh, I'm not sure. Tell you what, I'll put the cones back out when you get down there. This way we both can work. That's why I have that type of background and want to bring that forward so that it doesn't keep happening.
100%. Thank you so much for that feedback, and I think we can all recognize almost the entire town's a construction site, and so there's traffic control everywhere, and if there's anything specifically I can help on an actual location level, my contact information is on the website, and we've chatted before. We can work with contractors in any area and try and improve access. If we can do better, we definitely will, and we'll ask our recovery partners and utility contractors to do the same. And that would go for all of the construction projects we're talking about. So thank you. Really appreciate the feedback, Linda. Yes, sir. And thank you for hanging tight, everybody virtually. We'll get there here in a second.
Bruce Lawrence, I've been here since 1972. I've been on the fire department for 25 years. We were very much interested in getting Elliott extended to Pence. And I didn't notice a lot of talk about that tonight. Hope that we're going to follow through with that. I know the railroad is important also. In other words, we're getting some laterals that need to be connected so that people can get out other ways. Fires in a different place. That's all I have.
All right, thank you so much. I would definitely agree. Elliott Road extension is a critical priority as well. We'll go here and then there and there. Is that okay? All right.
Bob Morrow, I've lived here since 1975, except for a few months after the fire. And like a lot of my friends I've talked to and people here, I'm interested in seeing the Skyway, the bottleneck downtown Skyway definitely needs to go away and allow 2 lanes in each direction, got the middle turn lane. And I'm not sure about the parking situation and so on, but I know during the fire there was quite a backup on that because of the abutments built out into those road lanes that I think they should be taken out because they really cause congestion, especially when before the fire we had full population here. It became a nightmare, especially during commute hours. So especially also for evacuations. Those abutments should come out and normal traffic flow in both directions with a center turn lane. That's the main reason I'm here, and I've said it before, and I'll say it again. Let's get it back to where there's 4 lanes all the way up and all the way back for both directions, except for that bottleneck. I just want to see the bottleneck go away. I think it's necessary.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Bob. Yes, Ward. Ward, Gabriel, you had your hand up.
And I appreciate that you're doing
real,
this.
Real close.
I appreciate that you're doing this, and I appreciate that we have this kind of a turnout. However, I'm also disappointed. I think something that is as critically important as this is, if you go back a couple of years, every time there was something critical to the people of the town of Paradise, we had 400, 500, 600 people in the CMA church. And we had agency representatives, town representatives telling us what was going to be happening. And with such a small audience, I don't think we're getting through to enough people. And I'd like you to see a big event where we're really going to tell the people how all of this is going to take place and then answer questions. Thank you for your time.
All right. Thank you, Ward. I will mention, a text went out today as well. We've done quite a lot to try and engage the public. It's such a challenge with a dispersed population, in person, COVID aside, in person, virtual, providing as many options as possible and so many different types of engagement and getting people to show up. And we're so grateful for those that are here and virtually. I know thousands probably received the text today about the link on how to remote in here on Microsoft Teams only a few hours ago. So really grateful and proud of the job we've done getting information out there. And then also being here in person is not the end-all be-all either. We're going to have this recorded on your schedule. You can watch it and provide that feedback in the survey. So we'll always try and do our best and do better. And we really do ask the public to show up to the events that we put on and provide your input. So Ron, you were next.
Thanks, Mark. I'm Ron Jones. And first of all, I got to say, thank you for putting this on. And kudos to Mark. You are one excellent grant writer. You've gotten a ton of grants done for us. And he was asking about, are we going to get taxed? Not as long as we got Mark Maddox writing grant
Oh my gosh.
requests. My gosh.
We're it's a great team. Thank you. Yeah.
Well, you know, somebody's got to be the leader, and you're doing a great job. So one of the, I just want to say, I'm really delighted to hear that for example, the Elliott Road Extension and Road Extension are part of this plan. Now is the perfect time to do this before people go in and start rebuilding homes on those areas where we're going to want to put a road. It's perfect because, you know, you don't want to mess with somebody's brand new house. So I love the fact that we're doing that. I wish it wasn't so slow, but so do you.
Yeah.
You know, I want to encourage everybody that's working on this. Thank you very much for doing such a great job. And yeah, let's get the extensions, let's get those done in as timely a manner as we can possibly do. And thanks again to Doug LaMalfa for writing a grant for us.
Yep.
So good job, guys. Thanks.
Thank you. Yes, sir, John.
Amelia.
Real close.
Okay. John Remelia, Paradise resident, temporarily living in Amelia. First off, somewhere after 2010, when Station number 2 was closed down on Wagstaff, we were told when it was brought up about response times, we were told at that time by council and the public works director and everything that they were working on getting Forest Service Road pushed through that would greatly reduce their response times. Well, here we are 10 plus years later. It hasn't been done. We were told 3 years ago or 4 years ago that this Almond project was going to clear up Skyway so we could take it back to an artery that people could get out. And now I'm hearing there's discussions of whether we're going to do that, even though we're doing Almond. The last thing is, about 2 weeks ago, Susan and I decided to take some rides on the North Escape routes. And the interesting thing is, as soon as you get off Skyway, going down to the flats down there, you lose your cell phone, you lose your GPS, and you're left with a blank screen that you had programmed to Bambi in because you knew that was the way out. And we need to get some signs on those roads down there, even if it's just an arrow that says Highway 32. I mean, it's real simple. I know it's the county, but we need to work together on it. And even on Skyway extension, Kim Yamaguchi pushed for. There is no cell coverage. GPS is spotty. We need to make sure these people, if we do have to go north, the north isn't forgotten. And, it needs to be marked. Lastly, I've got to compliment Mike Hudak and Public Works. Mike with his limited crew, and I know what he's dealing with. I've hired some of them. And we had an issue on Pearson with a right-of-way that was way up on the property. Within an hour, he was out there with a crew. But we need 3 or 4 of those crews because the vegetation on the sides of the road is nasty.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right, great feedback. Thank you, John. Yes, Miss in the back. And we can definitely pass on that feedback about the signage for State Route 32 exiting north. That's a great idea. Oh, come closer. I'm so sorry, can you come close to the microphone?
Really closer? Oh,
like
sorry,
really
my
close.
voice is- well.
It's okay.
And so I'm with him. I need to know where I'm going, but out of my other question, my parents left last week, a couple of days, and I have a bear in my backyard. Say, bumps in the night, okay, fine. But if I've got to evacuate, what am I supposed to be listening to? I am on Amazon.com. I am not listening. I am not watching broadcasts or anything. So what is the best way for me to decide? What am I supposed to do so that I know when I need to go?
Yes. Have you signed up for Code Red?
No.
Okay, we can
Know
provide
what
information.
any of these are, and my parents probably don't, but
Yeah, so the town of Paradise and Butte County, we use a system called Code Red. It's an emergency alert notification system where you can sign up and receive mobile alerts that use your location and a potential threat area that has an evacuation warning or order.
Code Red is a .com website.
Yes, I'll go and have our assistant to the town manager, public information officer, field this question. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Those are really great questions. So yeah, Code Red is actually an app. You can also access it online. And all of this information is...
It costs money.
It does not cost any money. Yes, and there's a lot more information of other ways you can get information about emergencies on our town website, townofparadise.com. Go to emergency services information. It'll have all the information about signing up for Code Red, in addition to our local radio station, AM 1500. We've recently got that back up and running after the fire. That is also an excellent way to get information. Once you're alerted of an emergency, that will have more information for you. And there's a lot more information there as well, like evacuation zone information and more. So I would encourage you to visit that site as well.
Okay, so since I'm up here, your most valued session. You guys have been through a couple of evacuations. I have not. So it kind of causes us nightmares. Do you have metal boxes with all your pictures in them? Do you have something dug up in the backyard, buried below? What is everybody else's strategy to save their most precious belongings?
Yeah,
Besides getting out of Dodge and saving your life.
Yeah, I recommend a go bag. There's information on our website as well on evacuation preparedness, ready, set, go. Butte Fire Safe Council has a lot of great publications. Our website for emergency services, emergency response has all of that information there.
Okay, so it has
Yep.
other people's, what they're doing?
Yeah, I think that's a more community conversation that I would ask around. It's a very, I think every answer you would hear might be different.
Right.
All right. Yep. Thank you again for the feedback, and we're so glad you're here. Any more in-person questions before we move over to virtual? All right, I see one more, and then we'll go ahead and give the virtual attendees a chance to ask a few questions. Thank you.
Good evening.
You can tip it down. There
Yep,
you go.
thank you. There are several points that I've mulled over for months, and one of them is how is there going to be a control over what happens above Paradise in the Magalia area? So are there going to be MOUs with the county? Does it go into the general plan? I think that's a really important piece. And that's future, that in 30 years somebody's forgotten about this fire They weren't here, they didn't know about it, but that's going to be really critical for evacuation. Just getting people out of Magalia can fill the roads in Paradise. Brings me to the four lanes in downtown, what's perceived as downtown Paradise. I'm amazed there was not an MOU that I'm aware of between the town of Paradise and Magalia or the county, because that happened as a construction project without somebody else having some input on it. But I think those are really important pieces. Widening Pence Road, as you know, that's where we are. There's an ingress egress. It's new since the fire with fence with a gate that's wide enough for automobiles. Before that house finalizes and is certified, you might want to relook at some of the planning issues for construction, because that's going to impact, and that should go for everything that's happening, because they're getting kind of added in, and that's going to impact all kinds of projects. Going with the meetings, I think it's really critical to have meetings that the public can really attend, including people who are living in Chico, still sitting on the fence as to whether they're going to come back. There is a lot of value, for instance, the young lady that was just up here, to meet other people, to find out who her neighbors are, because those contacts are not happening in a lot of ways. So there's a lot of value in some large-scale meetings. Other pieces. In 2008, I think we all remember the lightning fires that happened on June 24th. Oops, a couple days from now. That just about shut down almost everything, or had the potential to. Add 60-mile-an-hour winds, and that could have been a much larger disaster. There's no way to plan for all those things, but know that you have to have the capacity to get at least this town out, which is, of course, much smaller now. When it comes to some issues about parking in downtown, this is an opportune moment to grab some of those properties and put in downtown parking lots, if that's where downtown's going to be. At one point, I remember a lot of conversation about moving downtown off of Skyway, and whether or not that's still in the works is certainly up to the business owners, the property owners, but there are a lot of other options for parking. And so for the throughout Paradise, from town limit to town limit, north and south, that is all considered to be property of the town of Paradise, street itself?
Which street?
Skyway.
Oh, Skyway, yes. So Skyway maintains, the town of Paradise owns and maintains about 100 miles of public roads, and Skyway's included.
Okay.
The only portion that isn't owned and maintained by the town is Clark Road. It's State Route 191 from Pearson Road south. But in town, that's also Town of Paradise Public Works.
Okay, and then when you get to out of town,
Just north of Pence.
Skyway, pardon?
Just north of Pence is where the town limits ends.
Right, I know where the town limits are. But everything north of that belongs to the county and is maintained by the county.
Correct.
Okay, there needs to be an MOU, really does. I think that's going to be a piece that works out with your group, some of your group meetings. I think that's everything. Thank you very much for listening.
All right, thank you. Okay, so we'll go ahead and bear with me for a second and unspotlight the podium. Right, and then do we have, oh, great. We have a few people with their hands up. I'm not sure on our side who is going to manage unmuting the participants. Okay, Lindsay will be. So I see first, and in alphabetical order, I see Angela Kassler. And I apologize if I did not pronounce that correctly, but I believe you are unmuted and you are free to ask your question to the group. Oh, or you will be unmuted shortly. All right. Go ahead and try unmuting yourself now. You've been unmuted on our side. There should be a button in the upper right-hand portion of your screen that looks like a microphone, and if you click on that once, it'll unmute you, and if you have a microphone, we'll be able to hear you. Yes, I think I heard you.
You did hear me?
Yes, perfect. Thank you, Angela.
Great. I'll turn up the volume on my speakers. This way maybe it'll be better. Hello, my name is Angela Kassler. I own Sustainability Management Consulting and teach at Chico State. I have relocated to Red Bluff, and maybe one of the reasons people don't join the call tonight is we all feel like, are we allowed to participate anymore because we no longer live in the town and we don't want to bother the people that live there, but hopefully one day we'll come back. That's the plan. So I was hoping to learn about this. And thank you so much for capturing all those ideas from the sessions that we all went to with the sticky notes and thinking about how we could do this next time, because there will be a next time. And, we really appreciate in this plan that you just presented to us that you really captured all those ideas so well. And I don't think I will ever feel safe again until Skyway is opened back up. And I see Mayor Crowder sitting there, and Steve Colleton, Woody is, I keep asking, when do we start working on this? When do we start working on this? And so thank you. So with that said, what I think a lot of us were hoping for was a real walkable downtown with a parking lot and eateries and boutiques and shops where we could bring our kids to the park and we could have trick or treat there, and we could have, we envisioned a place where we could all pull off Skyway and safely enjoy, walking over to, the candy store, and it's pretty simple. So we do hope that would be the reason that we could have an enjoyable downtown that's so fun to visit. And so I know myself, I really look forward to that, the area behind Nick's and Bobby's. And I absolutely, those bollards in the middle of the street, I can't tell you how many people, that really impeded traffic. And so I wouldn't mind if those were removed immediately. Like, why wait 7 years for this plan to go through? You know what I mean? Like, that would really be super. And if we could chop up those sidewalks that jut out into the street that we all have to drive over, that would be amazing. And I think a lot of us would feel safer that at least we could drive down the sidewalk if we ever had to again. And I think that would help us all feel a little safer. Another thing that we really learned in the campfire that I never thought about before was shelter in place. And I think that having these emergency route lanes, the great idea is to have upcoming traffic for emergency vehicles, to have some designated areas. The county over at Nelson Bar, they created a little shelter in place with Butte County Fire Safe Council at Limesaddle State Park, where the RV camp is. And so I know about that, but I don't know if anybody else does. And, on Skyway, on Pence, on Clark, on Billy, on these major Elliots, some designated places where people, we all learned this last time that we could probably live like that. But next time, there will be all these new people that are here as well. And like these drills that happen in the community with our emergency personnel, it would be really helpful if we also engage the citizens next time so that we could also participate to say, I had no idea what it means to, they were using words that I never heard before about, down traffic, up traffic. After we all escaped, we were, like it's amazing nobody killed each other just driving down the wrong side of Skyway. And so those are some things we think about that may be very helpful to all of us in all towns as they look at Paradise as a model about what to do in the future as well, because we're going to be able to pass along these ideas to other towns that are being super beneficial to save lives. And one of the ideas that you presented tonight was so interesting, to put the lights up so that they could let the people out of the arteries reaching these main roads and then the main road of Skyway. And so I like that idea, but then I think about what happened during the campfire is that a lot of us didn't get our code reds because, you know, the police department had to evacuate and there was no one to push the button, you know what I'm saying? So when they're operating the streetlights, who's going to operate that? Who will remember to do that in an emergency? And you all are from Paradise, right? So you know how polite everyone is. When you stop at a four-way, everyone's like, no, you go. No, you go ahead, right? So that's the kind of people we are. And we will stop at that red light. I know it. And they will wait. So I just don't know if we could teach people to zipper and say, in an emergency, let someone in, you go. Let someone in, you go. You know what I mean? Like these practiced drills that we could have in our community would be super helpful to just say, you know, we'll keep traffic moving if you let people in. And those might be more helpful than someone having to operate streetlights remotely from a different location that might forget to do that in an emergency, because there's so much for people to be thinking about, right? And it's not, you know, it's not like you can just go through a list and say, I need to do this and this and this, which is also very helpful that maybe we should also develop as a county. So I just thought I would say thank you for developing this, and I hope that before we discuss this as a community, could we define walkable downtown? Because I think everyone's idea of walkable is different. I think in the presentation I was hearing walkable, meaning that we have crosswalks and sidewalks and things like that. So I would hope that perhaps before we even release this survey, that we could talk about what that means to everyone and, you know, what this town really wants. So thank you.
Well, thank you, Angela. I'm so grateful for your thoughtful feedback, and I can say all of the issues that you brought up will be considered and discussed further in the follow-up meetings to come and the work ahead of us. I will take a moment to highlight the walkable downtown and the Almond Street project, and we've heard a couple of people talk about it tonight. And I think if you haven't seen our updates for infrastructure recovery on the prior webinar, you can hear more about it there. But we actually have a really unique opportunity to literally build not a new downtown, but a growing downtown that better matches what the community is seeking. And with that, so almond, birch, fir, black olive, Foster, there's this unique opportunity to have that vision of a downtown with restaurants and shops and all of the amenities and community services, multifamily housing, affordable housing, all of those come to fruition. And so with that, we are actually literally under construction right now. That project should be complete by the end of the year, if not very early next year. And so considering the progress on Almond Street and the downtown off of Skyway, we really do have this unique opportunity to revisit and redefine what is important for Skyway being the arterial in the same segment. We still have businesses on that street, we still have community needs, but as we've heard in this presentation, that opportunity is fully present before us to reconsider what are the pros and cons that we want to see in an option that could be integrated with a repaving project. So again, Angela, thank you, and thank you for everyone who's brought those comments up, and we're really excited to continue to listen. We hear you and present options to the Paradise Town Council and seek direction on a best path forward. So with that, I believe we have another Angela on the call, Angela Clark. If we could unmute Angela and you could ask your question.
Yes, good evening. My name is Angela Clark. I'm zone captain for Zone 4. I do thank you guys for taking the time and the effort to put this together. However, I do feel, and I know that a few people have mentioned this, that maybe in the future holding some of these meetings at the CMA Church where people can feel a little more safer. We've just opened up from being shut down with the COVID. And I know that there's a lot of elderly folks up here that feel more vulnerable and compromised. One being my mother, and she doesn't like being in small areas where there's a lot of congestion. I was really hoping to hear somebody address Oliver. Evacuating the day of the fire, Oliver was extremely congested, especially with people coming off of Valley View. And I know that Angela, prior to me, was mentioning, letting one person go through, then another, and that did not happen over off of Oliver. And my zone has, post-fire, the largest amount of standing homes. And we have at least a good 150 homes that are being rebuilt from various states of being occupied to laying the groundwork for the foundation. So we're going to be facing a lot of congestion for future evacuations. Has there been any talk of addressing widening Oliver? After you pass Valley View, you have that one area where it's a hard turn and it's very congested when you're up in that area. So I'm just asking, what are your thoughts for that?
Well, again, thank you, Angela, for the feedback on Oliver. I've been trying to think in my head how to best respond. First, personal story for my family. They actually spent quite a long time on Oliver on the day of the fire, and so I can definitely relate and understand the impacts of what that was like. So, but with that in mind, and it wasn't highlighted in this presentation, is we actually have a grant that was secured pre-fire to look at the multi-use pathway that has been discussed tonight. So we have grant funding for the design of that, and that's in our queue as well of how we can get construction funding to widen Oliver to include an additional lane on that outside edge of that curve, again, to provide that capacity. So I hear that, and we'll consider it forward in the development of this transportation master plan and ensure that that project is included and continues to be highlighted moving forward.
That would be really appreciated, because I'm sure there's more residents in my zone that, have the same thoughts as myself. And I just want to be able to have my residents being able to get out safely, especially with, there is a lot of people living off of Valley View and the other different roads that come off of that one main road. So it would be something that we would be very grateful that you guys would look at.
Yep, thank you for the feedback.
Thank you.
All right, I see we have one more hand up, Denise. And are we ready for Denise? All right, I think you can now unmute yourself, Denise. Let's see, Denise Gunderson, I see you here with your hand up. Oh, there we go.
Okay, very good.
Yes,
thank you.
Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, Denise Gunderson, a 30-plus year resident of Magalia. I am well aware that the town and county, are separate, different rules, different jurisdictions, but we still are all connected here on the ridge. Paradise evacuates north, Magalia evacuates south, depending on the direction of the fire, as I think many of us realized that day. I mean, there were thousands of cars either going up over Butte Meadows or across Garland, Doe Mill to 32. I guess my question is, or maybe a little bit of a reassurance, is how are the town and the county working together to keep us all on the ridge safe, to have a secure evacuation route in both directions for the entire ridge? I guess looking for reassurance that you guys are talking together.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Denise. As mentioned, we have these multi-agency evacuation coordination calls that are ongoing, and we're excited to have that through this temporary transportation master plan but have these coordination calls continue in perpetuity. I think we have about 20 different agencies or divisions, whether that's City of Chico, PD, Public Works, Fire, Paradise Public Works, CAL FIRE, PD, Butte County Sheriff's Office, Butte County Office of Emergency Management. So there are many, many professionals that care very deeply about these issues and that are working very hard to ensure that our next evacuation is a successful one. So reassurance issued here, and we'll continue moving forward.
Okay, thank you very much.
Absolutely. Thank you. All right, great. So do we have any other guests that are joining us virtually that would like to make a comment? And if you would, at the top banner of your screen, there's an option for, it's called reactions, and you can raise your hand again, just as I've done here. So I don't see any current ones, so I'll check back with the room. How are we doing? Would anybody like an opportunity to speak that has not had an opportunity so far? Yes, sir.
While the consultants are still on the call, I just wanted to ask, has the consulting team considered coordination between the town and the county regarding choke points going north as well as the choke points going south? For example, the intersection with Penson Skyway, the intersection at the top of New Skyway with Koodalank, whether there could be additional pathways, whether it be like the Bader Mine Sunset connection or the connection from Indian Drive, which was never completed, in case there are issues like on the dam itself, in terms of everyday access as well as evacuation access. These are all potential ways to improve traffic flow. Also regarding Honey Run Road, the particular safety issue is with downhill bicycles and uphill vehicles at the same time. That if you're bicycling up the hill, you're going so slowly the vehicles in either direction are not a problem. But bicycling downhill, then the vehicles coming uphill are the problem. So if you want, one thing that was not considered, I mean, they talked about, one way uphill only or one way downhill only. But you could have bicycles both directions as long as there were not vehicles coming uphill towards the fast-moving bicycle. That's good for now.
All right, thank you so much. Okay, I'm going to check back virtually. I do not see anyone else raising their hand. I'll take this opportunity to, again, share our screen for the Town of Paradise Recovery website that highlights the Transportation Master Plan. So if you just type in townofparadise.com, looking for recovery or building and building, and also about the question relating to Code Red and email evacuation zone maps and reverse 911, those are here under community resources. But as far as recovery and building, you can click here, all the different information about grants and planning documents, rebuild advocates, and what the town is really dedicating our resources towards. But Transportation Master Plan is one of those. And I just want to highlight, make one quick correction. There was a mention about our August bicycling and walking network review. It's August 12th at 6 p.m. And so our next one for the downtown and Clark Road design standards, that's going to be Thursday, July 15th. And our final webinar of these four will be on August 12th. And right now, the survey is not posted to this website, but it will be right after this meeting, which is great. So we will continue pushing out the survey, and you can find the survey here. You can find it on Facebook, and I believe there's email lists and weekly updates where you can find the link and the URL to this survey that we talked about earlier this evening. So I'm going to do one final check here and stop sharing my screen. Okay, anyone virtually raising their hand? Seeing none. Anyone in person? Last call? Okay, well, thank you so much for everybody tonight coming, and we really appreciate your feedback, and I'm so excited for next steps and more to come. All right, thank you again. Have a good night.